Welcome to the Saturday Slam and Jam here on the Athletic NBA Daily. On today's show, we're talking Western Conference risers, our players of the week, and then Sam Cooper joins to talk about the lowly Phoenix Suns. But to start off, Al, tell me about the top stories this week.
Well, Andrew, the top story this week was the first matchup between Luka and the Mavericks since the worst trade in NBA history was made. Nico Harrison was in attendance and was showered with love from Lakers fans who chanted, "Thank you, Nico," several times during the game. Luka started off the game hot and ended with a triple-double, 19, 15, and 12 in the 107-99 win. While it was a good win for the Lakers, this week also saw them get arguably their most impressive win of the season, a 123-100 win over a healthy Nuggets team in Denver. It was Luka's best game yet as a Laker, scoring 32 points to go along with 10 rebounds and 7 assists. The Lakers have won 4 in a row and are 36-21, only a game back of the Nuggets for third in the West. Now, it wasn't a great week for the Nuggets, who also lost to the Bucks on Thursday. The Bucks have started to find their footing after making the midseason trade for Kyle Kuzma. Since Kuz has started averaging 30-plus minutes a night, the Bucks have won 5 of 6, with the only loss being to the Rockets in Houston. Prior to this 6-game stretch for the Bucks, Milwaukee had lost 6 of 8. It's great to see Kuz and the Bucks playing well while still getting some great Kuz content, such as the headline currently on his basketball reference page, quote, "New Bucks forward Kyle Kuzma seemed to briefly lose track of which team he was playing for as he returned to Washington Friday night," according to Noah Trister of the Associated Press. In the win over Denver, the Bucks had to overcome another triple-double from Nikola Jokic, who put up 32, 14, and 10 on 13 of 16 shooting. But it was Giannis and his season-high 19 rebounds that got the important win. Not only was it a great measuring stick win, but it was a much-needed win because hot on the heels of the Bucks is none other than the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons are on fire, folks. They have won 8 in a row, tying the Cavs for the current longest winning streak in the league. They're currently 10 games ahead of the pace needed to be a surprise team, meaning that they might beat their over-under by 20 games. This week, the Pistons picked up a couple of nice wins over the Clippers and Celtics. The 8-game winning streak is the Pistons' longest since 2008. They are now 21-9 in their last 30 games, and they have opened a 5-game lead over the Magic for the 6th seed. But you know what? Don't set your sights too low, because the Pistons are only a half game back of Milwaukee for 5th and a game back of Indiana for 4th. Now, I'm going to talk about Cade a little bit later, but how about one more mention of Malik Beasley, who's on an absolute heater from 3. Over this 8-game winning streak, he made 5.5 threes per game on 52% shooting. Now, by the time you hear this, the Pistons will have had their winning streak tested again with a game against the Nuggets on Friday night. Now, with the Pistons seemingly out of the play-in race, let's see what's going on down there. We've got 3 teams, Orlando, Miami, and Atlanta, all within a game of each other in the 7, 8, and 9 spots. And then we've got this 10 spot, which no one wants, but which legally must be occupied by someone. Now, currently in the 10 spot are the Chicago Bulls, who have lost 7 of their last 8, with their lone win coming over the Sixers. The Sixers aren't even in the 11 spot anymore. They've dropped to 12, having lost a league-leading 9 games in a row. Now, the good news for Sixers fans is that Paul George announced this week he was taking a break from podcasting to focus on competing for a championship. George didn't specify which championship he was referring to, leaving listeners guessing as to what other competitions PG might be involved in. Moving ahead of the Sixers this week was the Brooklyn Nets, the team that traded the 25, 27, and 29 Phoenix first-rounders, along with the, I forgot this, Mavericks 2029 first, to get 2 of their own picks back so that they could do whatever it is they're doing right now. They have gone 6-4 in their last 10. They sit only a game and a half back of the Bulls. The Nets won 3 more games in February than Philly and Chicago combined. Is this team really going to make the play-in? Does anyone want this to happen? Now, from the East play-in to the West play-in, we've got some movement. The Warriors continued their run of good play since the Jimmy Butler trade, winning all their games this week, including a 121-115 road win over the Magic on Thursday night that featured Steph dropping 56 points, including 12 three-pointers. Tom Ziller pointed out that it was the most efficient 55-point game ever, with Steph posting a 92.5% true shooting. The Warriors have moved. The Warriors have moved into the 7th spot, only a half game back of the Clippers for 6th. While the Wolves ultimately lost position in the play-in this week, they dropped to 8th. They did have one of the most improbable wins in recent memory. In a road game against the Thunder in OKC, the Wolves found themselves down by 22 at the beginning of the 4th. Now, given the opponent being on the road, that's probably a loss, but maybe there's a chance. Well, how about being down 16 with under 4 minutes to go? At that point in the game, OKC had a 99.8% chance of winning, but it wasn't 100%, and the Wolves figured out a way to unlock that 0.2%, pushing the Thunder to overtime before finally winning 131 to 128. Now, they have lost 5 of their last 7, but they still sit only a game back of the Clippers for 6th, who have dropped 6 of 10 heading into a Friday night matchup against the streaking Lakers. Finally, it was an exciting week for collectors of wiped iPhones. Adrian Wojnarowski announced this week that he'd be auctioning off the iPhones he used to break some of the biggest trades in the NBA. For the current low price of $2,000, you can bid on the phone Woj used to break the news the NBA was suspending the season because of a virus that would kill millions of people. Ask yourself, can you really pass up that opportunity? Now, if you don't have the funds right now, don't worry. I have a little life hack for you. You can just tell people your phone was once owned by Woj. No one's going to check because no one cares. And those were the top stories this week.
Oh, man. Our BetMGM line of the week, brought to you by our friends at BetMGM, is the Western Conference champion lines here. Now, you do have the Thunder at a minus 120. You have the Nuggets at a plus 500. And then you have two little surprise guys here. We have the Lakers at plus 650 and the Warriors at plus 1,000, with just as much disrespect heaped upon the Grizzlies at a plus 1,300 and the Rockets at a plus 3,500. Al, thoughts on these odds here? I think that most people would agree with this, but when you look at the standings, this does not mimic the standings.
Yeah, it makes sense in terms of current sentiment right now about these teams, but it's just amazing, for how much of the season it was Memphis and Houston in that 2 and 3 spot, and how much we were talking about these teams and we were debating whether they're contenders or not. And now, it feels like, at least looking at these odds, they've almost become afterthoughts to some extent. I mean, the Grizzlies are still there at plus 1,300, but the Rockets drop them below the Mavs, who are currently in the 9 spot. They have worse odds than the Mavs, and they have worse odds than the Clippers as well, who are at plus 3,000. I do think it's interesting to look at the Timberwolves, who are plus 4,000, just because, yes, they've been on this losing streak, but as we've seen in now 2 games, and really 3 games against OKC, they can play with the best teams in the league. Julius Randle's been out for a little while, which may or may not be a good or bad thing. And then Rudy Gobert, though, has missed the last 4 games. So you just wonder if they can get Gobert back and find some kind of rhythm. I'm guessing those odds will look different in a couple weeks. So yeah, that's it. I think it makes sense how it currently looks, but it's just amazing how much movement we've seen just in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, especially for the Warriors. I think that you could talk yourself into the Lakers, even pre-trade. You could talk yourself into the Lakers if LeBron and AD are healthy. You have so many inexperienced teams here at the top. They could still find their way there. But the Warriors looked dead in the water. And now with Jimmy, who really didn't even have a great game last night. It really was Steph, like you mentioned earlier. But you just can't count them out. If the Warriors are in tight games, let's say they make it through the play-in and they're in tight games with whoever these teams are at the top, do those teams really want to go into crunch time against Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler? That is a terrifying proposition. Now, those teams are going to have to play super close, tight games, and they're going to have to rebound, over their heads a little bit. But, that's a team that I think should look pretty scary as a lower seed to a lot of these guys.
Definitely. So, Andrew, that brings us to our favorites of the week. And we're going to start off with our favorite quote this week. And my favorite quote, it's not really a quote. It's a line from a Sam Amick article this week, writing after the Mavs-Lakers game. Referring to things people around the Mavs have said about Luka, Amick wrote, quote, "They predict his basketball demise, highlighting a health history that, as some see it, will likely lead to catastrophe in the next 5 years or so." I just love how dramatic this is. Demise, catastrophe. It feels like the Mavs keep upping the ante. All the reporting started with, the Mavs were unhappy with his conditioning. Now we're talking about basketball demise, pending catastrophe. The Mavs messaging since this trade has basically been, oh, you'll see. You'll see. Just wait. No, just wait. You'll see. Meanwhile, the Lakers have the third best odds to win the West. The Mavs might need to win 2 play-in games just to make the playoffs. But you'll see, Andrew. Give it 5 years or so, and when AD turns 37, you'll see, Andrew.
You'll see when Anthony Davis possibly has surgery here in a few weeks. You'll see what a risk this was. It's wild. I still can't believe it. Even just like sitting down and watching, I've watched a bunch of these Laker games, but it just feels still insane to see Luka in a Lakers jersey. Like it just blows my mind that it happened. And he hasn't really even played that well, thus far for the Lakers, but you can see it. You can see it start to happen where it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe they did this. My quote comes from a Laker, LeBron James, who said, "Why do you want to be the face of the league when all the people that cover our game on a day-to-day basis, SHIT on everybody? Obviously, I didn't ask for it. I feel ant. I understand. This is weird energy when it comes to that." And I just thought it's good to just recognize that. I thought there are a few LeBron quotes that I would probably read as my favorite quote of the week, but I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think that, and some of that is just birthed out of social media, but the game is really fun. And the game is really good. They talked about it on the NBA Daily yesterday with Law Murray about how diverse the game actually is when you actually start to unwrap it a little bit, but it's not covered that way. And people don't talk about it that way. And the people that represent like the NBA media often characterize the league in a very negative way, which honestly, I've watched a ton of basketball this year and I've enjoyed so much of it. And I do think that like there's so much more positive things to talk about on a night to night basis with this team or with this league that just needs to happen. And so, I give LeBron a lot of credit for saying it. And I think it's true. That the league just needs to be covered in a more positive light. I think the basketball is incredible. I think night to night, there's always something to talk about. I'm kind of amazed by it as we've done this NBA Daily project that every single night there's something good to talk about or there's something fun to talk about. And the league is in a good place. And to characterize it in any other way, I think is wrong, one. And I think it's doing a disservice to the players and a disservice to the teams. That like this has been a great year for basketball on the court. And it's been fun to talk about the off the court stuff. But I think if you're just tuning in on a night to night basis, you're going to find something that's fun and entertaining. And I think that we just need to start to shift that as an NBA media because we are doing, a lot of people are doing a disservice to the game, which I just think is kind of sad. So I commend LeBron for saying this.
Yeah, I think this is how you fight back. Like the players need to talk about this more, and I would say more explicitly, like naming names. Like, because I do think sometimes it just gets lumped into like, oh, they're talking about like, the worst of the worst, the guys like Skip Bayless or Stephen A. Smith, like the way they cover the game more for entertainment purposes. But, it's coming from a lot of other places as well. And so I think if players keep bringing this up, the fans are ultimately going to side on the players. They will side with the players. The players are infinitely more cooler than anyone in the media talking about the players. So if they just keep bringing it up, I do think it would change. My favorite stat this week, I found the stat over the weekend, made me laugh so much. I just wanted to share it. Jeremy Grant, not having a great season, averaging under 15 points per game and 3.5 rebounds per game while playing 32 minutes a night. But the stat that sticks out is the 2-point percentage. On 6 2-point attempts per game, Jeremy Grant is currently shooting 38.1%. That is lower than what he shot on twos for the Process Sixers his rookie season. It feels impossible. He's almost shooting better on threes, where he's shooting 37%, than he is on twos. And as a reminder, Jeremy Grant is 6'7". He plays the 4. So I went to StatHead and I looked up who was the last player to shoot that poorly on that volume of 2-point shots while also being 6'7" or taller. And the answer, you have to go back to the 2018-19 season when none other than 19-year-old rookie Kevin Knox played 75 games for the Knicks. That is where we're at. That is the last time this happened.
Oh, no.
And if you're thinking, he just needs to cut out the mid-range shots, I have terrible news for you. He's also shooting 46.2% in the restricted area. But the numbers are so bad that I'm almost optimistic because they feel unsustainably bad. And knowing what his contract is, I feel like all you really can do is hope that it's unsustainably bad, because I think he's going to be in Portland for a while.
Yeah. I'm sure he seems to love it in Portland. He's picking out all kinds of fabric and shooting some Instagram reels of him picking out fabric. So shout out to Jeremy Grant, just doing his thing in Portland. My stat this week, unless you've been living under a rock, the Lakers have the best defense of the last 15 or so games in the NBA. Everybody knows that. But do you know the second and third best teams on the defensive end over the course of the last 15 games? It's the Brooklyn Nets at number 2, and it's the Portland Trailblazers at number 3. Which just makes me question both the Nets and the Blazers, which it's cool. You're having these little runs here, but what are we doing? You mentioned it about the Nets earlier, but you look up and down that roster. Who's one player that you think will be on that Nets team in 2 years? Can you name anybody? Maybe Day'Ron Sharpe?
Killian Hayes, so I just added to my fantasy team in 2025.
Listen, they're starting Killian Hayes and Zaire Williams and Keon Johnson, just kind of this all-star group of guys that truly disappointed the teams that drafted them. It's cool. I think you found a good coach. I think it signals hey, great. You found a good coach for your franchise. This definitely feels like the original glue guys Nets team, but boy, they need some guys that can really come in and help them. And you're typically not going to find those guys at 8, 7, 8, 9, or wherever they're going to pick in the draft. That's not usually where you find those kinds of guys. And so it does feel honestly, they picked a direction. But they just keep winning games anyways.
And if they hadn't made the trade, you'd feel great, because it's wow, the Suns are going to miss the playoffs. Yeah. Their pick could be better than the Nets, and you would get that, and you would still have all those future picks. Yeah, the Blazers one I think is more understandable and exciting for their long-term health, because it's guys like Toumani Camara, it's guys like Donovan
got some
Clingan.
Guys. They've got some young guys. Yes.
Yeah. They're Donovan Clingan's advanced stats are looking really good. He's an incredible rebounder. He's good around the rim. So I think that one you can feel good about. What are they going to do? At this point, it just kind of is what it is. They've won 3 in a row. I think you just kind of ride it out. Hopefully, they'll keep playing their younger players more and more down the stretch of the season. But yeah, it's pretty incredible, because we're talking about a 15-game sample at this point that these two teams are, second and third best defenses in the league. So pretty wild. All right, that brings us to our favorite player this week. And my favorite player was Cade Cunningham. It was a statement week for Cade and the Pistons, who, as I mentioned, have a 5-game lead now over the Magic for the last guaranteed playoff spot. And Cade was a huge part of the Pistons' success this week, as he always is. In the 4 games, Cade put up 29 points, 5 rebounds, 10.5 assists per game on 51, 50, 86 shooting. He scored 38 against Atlanta, including a career-high 7 3-pointers. It's just awesome to see how much things have changed for Cade in a year's time. I mean, it wasn't much more than a year ago when there was that game during the losing streak where Cade just looked completely broken at the end of the game. And Miran Fader wrote an article for The Ringer this week about Cade and that journey from his rookie season till now, but there was a lot of focus on last season. And Cade opened up about his mental health struggles. He talked about how during that 28-game losing streak, he'd sometimes stay up all night, till 6 a.m., just scrolling through social media comments, which I think a lot of us can empathize with and know how miserable that must have been. And it's kind of incredible that Cade was able to absorb all that, come back this season, and play as well as he has. And I just love that he and the Pistons haven't just improved. They've completely skipped that middle step that I think a lot of us, including you and I, were expecting from them this season. Like, we thought they'd be better. They're obviously going to win more than 14 games, but we thought it would just kind of be like that middle step, and then maybe something would happen the next season. But Cleaning Glass has them on pace for 44 wins, which would represent a 30-game improvement. They're currently on pace for somewhere around the 5th largest year-to-year improvement in NBA history by win percentage. And a lot of that is because of Cade, who is a deserving favorite player of the week.
Shout out to Cade Cunningham. I'm going to go with another guy from that draft class, Josh Giddey. Josh Giddey, since the trade deadline, is averaging...
I should have picked him last week, Andrew. I should have picked him.
19,
post All-Star bounce.
I know, for real. 19 points per game, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, shooting 52, 62, 86. And while the shooting percentages are surely not going to continue, it's just good to see them committing to Josh Giddey and some other young guys during the stretch and letting them take some of these possessions. And what was impressive during the month of February, Josh Giddey is actually a +8 when he's on the court for the Chicago Bulls, which I did not expect to see. His playmaking has been impressive as always. But the way he's playing could actually be making this decision for the Bulls pretty tough this summer. I think they need to make a decision between him and Kobe White. Kobe White's up for contract extension this summer, and Josh Giddey's up for an extension himself. He'll be a restricted free agent. And I think they need to make a decision, but Josh could be making this decision quite easy with the way that he's been playing lately. Josh has actually shot better than Kobe White from 3. When you look at the entire season, Josh has shot 38% from 3 on the season to Kobe White's 36%, which is another stat that made me say, what? And then Giddey, with his restricted free agency coming up, I'm just curious to see what they end up getting, like how they lock him up. Is it like a 20 to 25 million for him, which I think makes sense. But if it's closer to 30, I think that's kind of tough to commit to for Giddey. Yeah. So I'm really curious to see what that looks like. But I think you're going to have to probably commit that to either him or to Kobe White. I don't think you can do both. I think that it really messes up the Chicago Bulls cap sheet moving forward if you commit to both. And so I'm really curious to see what that looks like. And I'm hoping that they actually do something in really just committing to a direction. Like, just commit to like Giddey and Modest Buzelis and maybe some of the other young guys and just move forward. Trade Kobe. Vooch is going into the final year of his deal at $21 million, which is like very movable. I think there were definitely some teams that were interested in him at the trade deadline this year. And so I think the Bulls, one, it's important to mention that like since the trade deadline, they've only lost one game, and it was against the Sixers. Or they only won one game, which was against the Sixers, which I think is really important. But I hope that they continue to commit to a direction, because you could see a pretty bright future with Giddey and Buzelis. And then if they got somebody that they liked in this draft, and then you're just terrible next year, and then you're in the running for the number 1 pick in the next year, which I think puts you in a pretty favorable position if you're Chicago. So I think just the hope here is that, like, yeah, maybe you extend Giddey, you trade Kobe, you trade Vooch, just commit to a direction, because they have been in the middle for too long, picking in the middle for too long. And if you can actually commit, this doesn't look as bad as it has the last few years.
Yeah, you mentioned his stat line post All-Star break. But the actual like box scores, they're crazy. Like 27, 16, and 4, 24, 8, and 10, 25, 16, and 6, 21, 8, and 12. It's been wild. Should have picked them. Finally, favorite moment this week. Now, for me, it was a tight race. Narrowly beating out that super fast baby in New Orleans who destroyed all the other babies in the Pelicans baby race was Shaedon Sharpe's dunk against the Wizards. A week after picking him to make a post All-Star break jump, and then getting very nervous when he scored only 12 points against the Jazz. He had a career game against the Wizards, scoring 36 and having a dunk worthy of Dunk of the Year discussion. It was a beauty. He took off from way outside the restricted area, full extension of the arm. It was great. And after seeing the dunk, I did what everyone else did. I rushed to NBA.com to see what dunk score it got.
No.
And Andrew, It was a 113.9. Are you kidding me? 113.9. Now, I'm not going to give you any context for that score and how it relates to other scores. I'm just going to complain. You got to get it together, NBA.com. You know that dunk wasn't a 113.9. If you think that was a 113.9, you're a fool. You got to fix it. I'm the only one who cares about this, but I think the dunk score is a cool idea, and there's no reason why that should not be the best dunk of all the dunk scores. It's barely better than that John Collins dunk I mentioned a while back, but it's obviously better. In fact, the number one dunk, do you know who it is, Andrew? Are you up on your dunk score?
No, I'm way behind on dunk score.
It's a Quentin Grimes dunk, okay? And it's a perfectly nice dunk. It's a good dunk. But it's like, it's a 118, Andrew. And the only reason is because they are overvaluing or not correctly identifying defense, okay? They want the guy to be like on you, okay? Instead of like what happened with Shaden was the guy kind of jumped and Shaden just kind of moved him. And it wasn't like a necessarily collision at the rim. But come on. We can see aesthetically that Shaden Sharp dunk was the best dunk we've seen this year. So I think they just need to, they should tweak it, Andrew.
There's a way to fix dunk score, and it's like just calculate in there how much it was shared on social media.
That's a great idea. It's a great idea, Andrew, because I guarantee you that one was shared more than the Quentin Grimes dunk.
No.
And here's another
question.
idea. Everyone's complaining about how the like NBA players you want to see aren't in the dunk contest. If you're going to give out random scores, why not fudge the scores for the guys that you want to be in the dunk contest and make a big deal about it? Yeah, artificially inflate their dunk scores to get them excited and be like, oh, you got to be in it. Look at these dunk scores you're doing.
Check out your dunk scores. My moment of the week was Anthony Edwards against the Lakers. He had already been teed up in kind of this like weird, like double tech, like after the buzzer moment that just felt a little bit unnecessary. And then he got teed up again where it's funny because like there's been so much talk about Chris Finch and the way that other, like especially the Thunder were officiated and stuff like that, where Ant he clearly just like pushes off fully against Gabe Vincent as he's falling down. He falls down. I don't know what he said to the official. It didn't look like it garnered a tech, but he ended up getting it. I have no clue what he said to the official, but I'm sure he said something and got teed up, got thrown out. He didn't leave the court in a timely manner. I think he threw the ball into the crowd. Like there was just like a lot going on there. It was his 16th tech, which means that he'll be suspended for the next game. And I was just looking back at like his technical foul history. In the year before, in 79 games, he had 15, so he never didn't get suspended. In the year before, he had 13 in 79 games, and then he had like single digits in the years prior. And so it's just like this, it's not a good trend for Ant. And I think that one thing that we just need to remember about Ant, and he's kind of showing this, is like Ant is still really young. And I think that we're always looking to crown like the next guy. Like, who's the next guy? And Anthony Edwards has been pushed as that. He even said, like, I don't want it. That was a part of what LeBron said. But he's only 23 years old. Like, this is a guy that is still not in his prime yet. He's still in like this pre-prime age. And we're 2 or 3 years away from him becoming like a guy who's in his early prime. And so, like, to me, like this one, it indicates like not a very good trend for him and that the technical fouls are ticking up. But also it's like, this guy still has a long way to go. And so like, I think that we need to like give him a little bit of grace as he kind of moves through this part of his career, and in hopes that too, that he'll mature a little bit over the next couple of years for the Timberwolves as they continue to try to build around him. He's still a tremendous player, but there's still a lot of growth that needs to be had. And I think for players like this, I just think like extra grace for them as they kind of grow through these moments, I think is good, but it's also just something to watch for Ant because, you know, there's no one that's really had anywhere close to this amount of techs this season. And so just something to watch for him as he gets suspended here. I wonder what that looks like. You know, he's suspended without pay. How does that impact him moving forward? I think is a question that I have. And is this like a wake up call for him, or is this just going to be a trend for Ant as he kind of gets older and more emboldened? So just something to watch for Ant, because he's kind of become the league's hothead when it comes to technical fouls.
But also, there's got to be someone in that role, Andrew. I mean, I'm looking through.
Someone's got to take the mantle. Someone's got to be the Rasheed Wallace. Yeah.
I was thinking I knew Luka and Draymond were big tech guys. I kind of forgot that Trae Young, once upon a time, was a big tech guy. He led the league in 2022 in technical fouls, which I would have never guessed. Russ back in the day, Westbrook used to get a bunch of techs.
He was a big one. So, he would get suspended. Yep.
Yeah.
So you look at the league this year. Ant has 16. Draymond has 11. Contavious Caldwell Pope has 11.
Oh, wow. That's weird.
Dylan Brooks has 11. Trae Young has 10, and everybody else has single digits. Isaiah Beef Stew Stewart has 9. Jason Tatum has 8. Josh Hart has 8. John Morant has 8. Luka has 7. 7, that's pretty good for Luka. Then Miles Bridges, Chris Paul still in the top here with 6. I saw 2 of those in Portland when he got ejected in 9 seconds. Yeah, that was pretty fun. Yeah, that's interesting. But I just think that's an interesting trend here as this kind of ticks up for Ant and something to watch for. Something else to watch for is just how bad the Suns are. And we're going to talk about them right after this quick break.
Andrew, it's time once again for the Wheel of Fandom, the weekly segment where we spin a wheel, it lands on a team, and we become fans of that team for the next week. Last week, the wheel landed on the Phoenix Suns, a team theoretically fighting for the playoffs. This week, Suns started the week off right. 4-point win over the Bulls. They followed that up with 3 straight losses, including losses to Toronto and New Orleans, and a particularly tough 151-148 overtime loss to the Grizzlies. The Suns have lost 9 of their last 11, with the only wins being over Chicago and an overtime win against Utah. Phoenix has the hardest remaining schedule with only 3 of their final 23 games against teams currently below 500. The Suns are 27-32, 11th in the West, 12th ranked offense, 27th ranked defense per cleaning the glass. Andrew, if our favorite team is the Suns, who is our guest?
We've got our guy, Sam Cooper from the Timeline podcast. I hesitate to even ask this question, but Sam, how are you doing?
I'm smiling. I'm smiling through the pain. Thank you for having me, guys. It is, it's over for this team for sure. I don't know if you want to talk about chasing the playoffs anymore or what, but yeah, it's been tough. It's been tough for the team.
Yeah, it's not been great. But Sam, when you kind of think back to how you were feeling about this team coming into the season, what has been the most surprising thing about how things have unfolded?
Just the general lack of cohesion, I think. And I don't know precisely why I thought it was going to be so much better than last year. It's funny to think about last year, because I was not one of the people who threw previous head coach Frank Vogel under the bus, although some people did. Yeah. But, that team that went 49-33 and was miraculously top half of the league in defensive rating, we thought that was a disappointment. And I think understandably so going into that season, because there was still this belief about the big three and what Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal could accomplish together. But, they're so much worse than that now. They are so much worse than a 49-33 team that is 13th in defensive rating. And they lack cohesion. They lack energy. They lack focus, concentration. Just honestly, at this point, guys, they're a team that's just going through the motions on any particular night. And I think just about all of us are ready for it to be over.
So KD was on Draymond's podcast this week. He discussed the trade deadline, how he didn't want to be traded midseason. He would rather wait for the offseason if that's what the Suns want to do. So knowing that a KD trade is likely coming this summer, do you think most Suns fans want to try and retool around Booker, or are more fans in the camp of just blowing everything up and starting over?
Yeah, it's a good question. You'll definitely see representatives from both sides. I think there is such an emotional attachment to Book. I don't know if you guys were following, but a few weeks ago, he became the franchise all-time leading scorer. Mm-hmm. And there aren't many records for this franchise that, he still has to take down. I think he passed someone, I think also Walter Davis, for 4th on their all-time assist list the other day. He has a ways to go if he wants to track down Steve Nash for number 1 on that one. But he's got the scoring record. And I think, the majority of Suns fans want to retool around Devin Booker as long as he wants to be here. And I think that's going to be part of the front office, whatever the front office looks like, because that's another question. But the front office's challenge this summer is having these mature conversations, first of all, with Kevin Durant to try and facilitate something for him that works for both sides. But then also talking with Devin Booker and seeing, he's been through a lot as a member of the Phoenix Suns, a lot of different eras where they were competing, eras where they weren't. He's been through about 7 or 8 different head coaches in 10 years. And, we're not exactly sure what he is prepared to do for the next 2 or 3 years. But if they both believe mutually that there's a path forward to maybe retool around him and try and compete on some sort of 2 timeline plan for the next couple of years, then I do think they're going to try and do that.
What are your, when you think about a KD trade, do you have any expectations for what a return this summer might look like?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? Because I think on the one hand, KD is an expiring deal next year. Yeah. So I'm sure he's going to be interested to some extent in controlling his own destiny. Stars always are. And, I think that's going to be the difficult thing for Phoenix. On the other hand, what they have going for them is a lot of teams already called about KD at the deadline to express some interest. And I can guarantee you guys right now, there are going to be at least 2 or 3 teams that flame out early in the playoffs this year that are going to be asking themselves immediately in the aftermath of that, hey, should we get KD? Would that put us over the top? So I think there's going to be a little bit of give and go with it. My expectations generally, you have to match salaries regardless. My only hope would be that they're matching salaries in a way that is not taking on any albatross contracts. So, it doesn't have to be A-level prospects to me, but, hopefully guys who are under, some combination of rookie contracts and second NBA contracts, guys in the 24 to 28-year-old range, and not anyone who's, Rudy Gobert from the Timberwolves or something, just not taking on contracts that don't make sense. And beyond that, a couple first-round picks. And I really think that's all it is for KD. They're not going to get the Brooklyn Nets-esque haul, who, when you look at it in hindsight, after Brooklyn was able to execute the Mikal Bridges trade, they got 9 first-round picks out of KD. Yeah. And that was him a couple years ago, also controlling his own destiny, saying, I want to go to Phoenix. So that's pretty remarkable in hindsight, but I don't think Phoenix is going to get that, and I think they're okay with that. I think, they just want to move on and try and, maximize their return to an extent, but mostly put their best foot forward for the next few years.
Do you have a favorite fake trade?
That's a really good question. I guess it depends on what you guys think. I'd be curious, actually, are realistic versus unrealistic destinations, right? Because it seems like everyone talks about Houston, the prospect of the Suns maybe getting their picks back. That feels like a team that could, I'm not saying anything, they could be great in the playoffs, but they could also flame out in the first round or second round, for sure.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about OKC. I don't know. I think, OKC has no interest in making that deal unless, similarly, they lose in the second round or something, surprisingly. San Antonio is
for the Thunder. I will just say that my guess is they don't want Kevin on this contract.
Yeah. Okay.
And what they would have to give up in order to get there, it'd have to be a combination of Hartenstein and Dort and draft picks. And I think once you're already there, I think it's just a flat out no. I don't think it's impossible that there is a Thunder Kevin Durant reunion at some point, but I would rule it out under this current contract. That's just what I would say about that.
Yeah, and some people have thrown out too, we don't know exactly what KD's expectations are for the end of his career to look like. I've heard people throw out, I forget who it was a former player, but Washington, if he wants to go home and finish his career with the Wizards, which I think is a little bit far-fetched, but San Antonio is another one we talked about on our podcast recently that I think actually would be pretty interesting. I think, they have salaries that they can match, surprisingly, in the form of Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes. They could get there. And I think, putting KD next to Wemby and De'Aaron Fox, the problem with KD at this point, right, because he's still a great player. He's a great player. He's not the same defender he was. A lot of people still think he's that defender he was in Golden State. I would say just watch him as a transition defender this year. Now, a lot of that is effort and not ability, but he's just not the same. And he's not the same advantage creator he once was. So I think if you're a team that's going after KD, he can absolutely help you win a championship. He's a bucket. He's an incredible, incredible shot maker. But if you're leveraging this idea that he's going to be your offense's number one advantage creator, that's kind of where Phoenix, in my opinion, has gone wrong already for the past 3 years. And so, a team like San Antonio, I think, would actually be able to sort of insulate him with the right pieces, both offensively and defensively. Houston is interesting because he kind of would need to be that number one guy on offense. So, I would have some questions about exactly how it's going to fit. But yeah, there are options for sure.
Yeah, no, those all make sense. So one of the talking points this week was Coach Bud's refusal to play Ryan Dunn for a team with a bottom 5 defense. Dunn played a total of 26 minutes across 4 games this week. Dunn started off the season hot, but he's faded recently. What are your thoughts on just the way his rookie season has unfolded?
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate that Bud hasn't given him consistent playing time. Now, he came out shooting hot 40% through the first, 10 games or something, and that was obviously always fake. But I do think it's unfortunate now as Ryan comes in and he tries to find his way in this rotation. And when you're not getting consistent minutes, he just doesn't look like he has quite the same level of confidence. So I think that's one of the biggest tragedies of the season. Defensively, his value speaks for itself. He's one of the only players on this team who consistently cares and makes second efforts and always nails his rotations and is a great point of attack defender at essentially every position. The Suns struggle with point of attack defense. They're consistently playing guys who are like 2 or 3 inches shorter than they really need to be. Tyus Jones at point guard, Grayson Allen at shooting guard, Royce O'Neal at small forward. Sometimes those guys can be okay defenders, but as it doesn't really equal it's something less than the sum of their parts is kind of how you describe the entire roster. And Ryan Dunn has kind of been their only good point of attack defender all season long outside of Josh Okogie, who they traded. So, yeah, he needs to play more throughout these last 20 games. That's kind of one of the only things I'm looking for because I don't really expect them to make the play-in or the playoffs anymore. I just want to see a little bit more of a renewed focus on, what the future of this team is going to look like, and that absolutely involves Ryan Dunn.
You may have answered my next question because I was going to ask, are there any positives to take away from the season? Like, is there a player development story or anything Suns can hold on to take away from this season?
Let's just torture you just a little bit more, Sam. Can we get you to feel a little bit worse? Okay, go ahead.
It's funny. No, it's funny because I'm not sure I've actually asked myself that question, and it's a good question. So, are there any positives to take from this season? I think, all of us have been tested. Our discipline has been tested. That's always a good thing, right? But I think you're still seeing, like, Booker has slumped at points throughout this season, but then he'll wake right back up and torch teams for 5 or 6 games in a row. And I think it's just encouraging to see, he's a guy who has people don't realize maybe a lot of mileage on his body. He's been in the league for a long time. And I think it's always just encouraging to see, this is a guy who, if they do choose the retool path, there's no reason to believe that he can't play competitive basketball for many more years. So, that's obviously encouraging. Dunn and Oso, when he plays to an extent, Oso Agudaro, their second round rookie, have been encouraging. I like the fact that they have Nick Richards under contract for another year to be a backup center, hopefully next year, not a starting center. I like the fact that they have Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal on long-term deals. Those are guys who anyone would agree are obviously NBA rotation pieces. And I think either if you're doing the retool, they can be a part of like a fairly good team. And if you're doing a blow up, I think both of them could command draft picks. So, I think it's just like from an asset management standpoint, there are things to point to. But yeah, development-wise, there's not a whole lot.
Yeah.
Just to prod at you one more time, this era of the Suns basketball will not be remembered fondly. But looking back, would you say that there was like a high point of this KD Beal experience?
8-1. 8-1 to start this season before they went 19.
Yeah,
and they're 19 and 31 since. They were 8-1. They won a playoff series in 2022, but that's not the KD Beal because that was before Beal.
Yeah.
The KD and Beal era Suns are going to finish their tenure having made one playoff series and getting swept.
Yeah.
So I've been covering the team, on our podcast for 7 years. We started in a season in which they went 19 and 63. and under head coach Igor Kokoshkov, rookies DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges. Just to give you guys an idea, like we covered them in the finals. We covered them afterwards, losing to Dallas in Game 7, losing to Denver in the second round the year after that. So we've gone through a lot of stuff. This is by far the low point in terms of how I felt about the team. I would point at, even watching the team back in 2016, 2017, 2018, when you were rooting for guys like Dragan Bender, Josh Jackson, at least there was this idea of hope. Right now, I mean, I think we can get back there. But I'm just so ready.
We can get back to the Dragan Bender era. We can
get back. But I am so ready for this season to be over, to just cut. And I don't blame KD for it, but just cut the losses. The big problem, guys, is like, if this era has taught me anything, you never trade for a guy with a no trade clause. You never do.
Yeah.
Because even once they cut their losses on KD, which they will do this summer, if there was anyone out there for a Beal trade, that's the thing that would really save them. And I think there just isn't. I think they're just going to be stuck with him for another year. So that's a $50 million handicap, which has just killed us.
Yeah. Well, Sam, thank you for answering all of our Suns questions. Now for something lighter, it's time to play Andrew versus the Beat, our weekly trivia show. This is the Suns edition. Sam Cooper from the Timeline Podcast challenging Andrew. And Sam, how this works, I've come up with 8 questions about the Suns. You'll give me a number between 1 and 8. It'll correspond to a question. If you get it right, you'll get at least 2 points. If you get it wrong, Andrew will have a chance to steal for 1. And then we'll go back and forth until all the questions have been asked and answered. So to start us off, Sam, I just need a number between 1 and 8.
Let's go with 4.
Question number 4. Phoenix is allowing a league worst shooting percentage in what area of the court? So this is opponent shooting percentage. Which area of the court? At the rim, mid-range, above the break, threes, or corner threes? Where are they allowing a league worst percentage?
I get to answer first before.
Yes.
Let's go corner threes.
Sam, that is correct for 2 points on the board. All right, Andrew.
Number 1.
Ryan Dunn has already played over 900 minutes in his rookie season. Who was the last Suns rookie to play at least 900 minutes?
Ooh.